You ever get that gut feeling something's wrong, but you still go along with it because you want to believe just once, maybe this time they'll see you? That was me at 13, standing in a blue dress, hair curled, blindfolded, smiling like a fool, thinking maybe, just maybe, this birthday would be different. Spoiler, it was. But not in the way I hoped. It became the kind of revenge story I never meant to write, but I damn sure finished it. Back then, I was still Avery Ward. We lived in a one-story clapboard house on the edge of town, Lancaster, Ohio, where silence passed for peace and humiliation passed for parenting. My dad, Colton, used to be a cop, the kind who bragged about building character by making you feel small. My mom, Renee, was just there, not cruel, not kind, just floating somewhere behind him, nodding along. And then there was Madison, my younger sister, queen of the living room, golden child in lip gloss and fake sweetness. Birthdays were never my thing. One year, I got an accidental diet book. Another year, nothing but a lecture about being too needy. So when they started acting weirdly, nice. I should have known. My mom bought me a dress, blue with tiny white flowers. My dad told me to be ready at 3 p.m. sharp, said we were doing something special. Madison didn't insult me for a whole day, so I dressed up. I curled my hair with an old straightener that barely worked. I waited on the porch with butterflies in my stomach, thinking, maybe Applebee's or a movie. Something normal. They pulled up in Dad's truck, Madison in the front seat, grinning like she knew a secret. Mom opened the door and held out a red satin blindfold. "It's a surprise," she said. "Trust us for once." I got in. Let them blindfold me. Let them buckle me in. For the first 10 minutes, I smiled so hard my cheeks ached. Then silence. Then gravel. Then dirt. Then the truck stopped. Dad's voice was flat. "All right, out." I stepped out in heels that sank into mud, still blindfolded, still hoping. Then the doors slammed, laughter, tires spun. I ripped the blindfold off, nothing but weeds, a crooked barn, and dust. No cake, no party, no people. From the distance, "Happy Barn Day, loser!" Madison yelled. My mom shouted, "Smile!" Dad honked twice, like that was the punchline. And just like that, I knew I was never meant to be celebrated, just mocked, just molded into silence. But that moment, that barn, that's where I stopped being their daughter and started becoming something they'd never recognize. After the barn, I stopped asking for things. No more birthday wishes, no more wondering if they'd remember parent-teacher night or that I'd won the art contest. I just shut down, because in that house, silence was safer than hope. We didn't talk about that day. We didn't talk about much, really. My mom poured wine like it was water. My dad binge-watched reruns of some 90s cop show and barked orders if I crossed his line of sight. Madison, she just kept living her princess life, posting fake perfect selfies while calling me barn baby under her breath. One time, I walked past the kitchen and heard my dad on the phone with an old precinct buddy. The guy asked about me, if I was doing okay. My dad laughed and said, "Avery's still quiet, that's good. The less she talks, the better." That one cut deeper than the barn ever could, because that wasn't a joke. That was who I was to him. Less noise. At school, it wasn't much better. Someone printed out a screenshot of the Happy Barn Day post and taped it to my locker. Someone else made a TikTok remix, violin music and all. Teachers didn't intervene. One even said, "At least they're not hurting you." So I stopped wearing color. I stopped raising my hand, and when someone asked how I was, I said, "Fine," like it was a shield. You ever been the person no one asks about? Like, really think about that. What's it like to sit at dinner with your family and realize they wouldn't notice if you disappeared? Because if you've been there, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I read them. I see you. And honestly, it helps to know I'm not the only one who learned to disappear just to survive. Anyway, by 14, I had a notebook under my bed labeled exit plans, skills to learn, places to run, what to pack. I Googled things like military age minimum, how to join with no family, and can silence be a strategy? Turns out it can. Turns out, training your emotions to shut up is a skill, especially in war. I didn't know it yet. But that notebook? That was my first briefing. That was the start of a different kind of uniform. Not one they gave me. One I built, word by word, line by line, under the bed they forgot I slept in. I enlisted the day I turned 18. No party, no balloons, no one at the bus stop. My mom sent a text that said, "Good luck." My dad, nothing. I remember sitting on the edge of that Greyhound seat with a single duffel bag and zero expectations. Just one goal, become someone they couldn't ignore, even if I never let them see it. At basic, they strip everything down: name, style, attitude, gone. All that's left is what you can carry. And I carried silence like it was a weapon. Most people talk to cope. I didn't. One guy called me ghost quiet. Another said I had that quiet killer energy. I didn't correct them. They weren't wrong. I got placed in psychological operations, SCAO piece. It's not about pulling triggers. It's about pulling strings, breaking down how people think, believe, and lie to themselves until the lie feels better than the truth. My CO, Staff Sergeant Reese Molina, saw right through me on day one. "You think before you speak. Good," she said. "Let's keep it that way." She taught me how fear moves in crowds, how misinformation wraps itself in comfort, how sometimes the strongest move you can make is not reacting. I knew a little about that already. In one training drill, I had to get intel from a fake captive without threats or force. I just asked him one thing: "Who do you think they'll blame when this fails?" He folded in under 10 minutes. Afterward, Reese pulled me aside and asked, "You ever use that on the people who raised you?" I shrugged. "Not yet." She smirked. "When you do, make it count." And I held on to that. Because while other soldiers were dreaming of home, I was dreaming of exits, how to leave a conversation, a room, a memory, a legacy. I memorized emergency exits on every base, not out of fear, out of habit, because knowing how to leave, that gave me power. Then came deployment, Afghanistan. We were trained to think in shadows, intercepting radio calls, designing fake broadcasts, meeting with tribal elders to shake out lies from half-truths. It was paperwork with a pulse. And sometimes, it got personal. A village, a rifle, a kid no older than I was when they left me in that barn. One shot, my teammate bleeding out in my lap. The war was loud that day, but the silence after, that hit harder. Because in that silence, I finally understood. The battlefield wasn't there. It never had been. It had always been inside me, waiting, watching, ready. I got discharged on a Wednesday, honorable, medical. No celebration, no flag folding, just paperwork in a manila envelope and a pat on the shoulder that felt more like a dismissal than a thank you. I flew home commercial, middle seat between a screaming toddler and a guy coughing up half a lung. Landed in Texas with nothing but a limp, a check, and a silence I'd grown to wear like armor. First night back, I slept on the floor of a motel in Waco. The bed looked too clean, too staged. I stared at the ceiling for hours. It looked just like the one from my childhood. Cracked, stained, ignored. A week later, I found it. A foreclosure listing. Old farmhouse in Marlin, outside Austin. The address made my stomach drop. It was my grandmother's house, the one on my mom's side, the one we weren't supposed to talk about. According to county records, she'd left it to me. My mother tried to contest the will. Lost. Never told me. The place had sat empty for years. Dusty, overgrown, forgotten. Kind of like me. I bought it using what was left of my discharge payout and some blog donations from a writing site I'd started under a fake name. No photos. Just raw posts about trauma, silence, war. One of them went viral. The one about the barn. That post found its way into forums, support groups, even Reddit. Women started messaging me. I thought it was just me. You put words to what I couldn't. I read your story at 2 a.m. and cried. And I thought, what if silence isn't the enemy? What if we just need a place where it doesn't feel like punishment? So I rebuilt the house. Not into a home, into a space. I named it Crosslight, part my new name, part the thing I never got. Light, on my terms. No ads, no formal launch, just a message board post and an email address. First weekend, 12 women showed up, some with duffel bags, some with nothing, all of them with eyes that had seen too much and mouths that didn't know where to start. We sat on thrift store cushions, no icebreakers, no therapy talk, just quiet, honest, sacred quiet. A sign on the fridge said, "Nothing in this house is off limits except cruelty." We cooked, we gardened, we patched drywall with YouTube and grit. We hung blackout curtains and taped notes to mirrors that said, "You are not hard to love. You were just taught wrong." We didn't talk about healing like it was a destination. We treated it like it was a habit. And then one morning, I got an email from Madison. It started with, "I don't know if you'll read this, but I had to try." Dad had collapsed. Stroke. Half his face paralyzed. Bills piling up. The VA was slow. The insurance listed me as the next of kin. Apparently, no one updated the paperwork. She ended with, "Please just help him, please." 2 days later, another message. Shorter, more desperate. "He's gonna die if we don't move him. I can't afford it. You're the only one they'll listen to." Attached was a photo. Dad in a hospital bed, that jaw I used to have, that smirk that used to belittle everything I was, now half dropped, crooked, and slack. I stared at that screen for a long time, not because I didn't know what to feel, but because I did. And I didn't like how much sense it made. So I printed the email, folded it, slipped it into a fireproof box next to a letter from my grandmother that said, "If you don't protect Avery, no one will." Then I went into town, bought groceries I didn't need, and let the decision breathe. I didn't answer Madison's emails. I didn't need to. Instead, I sent a single message to our on-site medical coordinator at Crosslight. "Can we accommodate a guest with limited mobility, potential speech impairment, and a long history of emotional manipulation?" She replied 5 minutes later, "We have space. We don't have patience. Your call." I made it. 3 days later, a transport van pulled up the gravel path. My father was in the back seat, slumped, tube in nose, one side of his face hanging like the truth finally caught up to it. Madison stepped out first, holding a designer purse she once bragged about online, the one she claimed she sold to help cover his care. She looked around like the house might bite her. I stepped onto the porch in jeans and a soft cotton tee, comfortable, centered. She saw me and froze. "Delaney," she whispered. I didn't answer. That name didn't belong to me anymore. I turned, opened the door, and let them walk into the space they once said I'd never amount to. Inside, the entryway was lined with photos, women planting flowers, painting rooms, laughing in pajamas. A quote stenciled on the kitchen arch read, "You are not hard to love. You were just taught wrong." My father's eyes scanned the room like it was a courtroom. Madison held her bag tighter. I said nothing, because the real confrontation wasn't here. It was coming. That weekend, I was scheduled to speak at the National Trauma Recovery Summit, hosted in Austin, a place for veterans, survivors, clinicians. I almost canceled. Then I remembered what Reese once told me. When you confront the people who hurt you, make it count. The venue was packed. Cameras, live stream, rows of folding chairs and strangers. I stood backstage, calm, wearing the same navy blazer I'd bought for $12 years ago, creased but solid. The moderator stepped up to the mic. "Our next keynote is a former SCOPS intelligence operative, founder of Crosslight, and an expert in resilience architecture. Please welcome Director Avery Cross." Colonel Ramirez, head of operations at DoD, met me just before I stepped on stage. He nodded once, firm and clear. "Ma'am, your session's about to begin." That was the moment, because sitting in the last row, trying to hide behind the live stream tech booth, were my parents. Invited? No, they showed up anyway, and they watched as the entire room stood to applaud me. Watched as I took the stage they said I'd never reach. Watched as I stood at the podium, looked directly into the crowd and said, Some people think trauma makes you weak, but it taught me to listen between words, to hold silence as power, to build a life so strong it doesn't need their permission to exist. No one clapped. Not yet. They just listened. Because when you say the truth out loud, in your own name, it doesn't need a round of applause. It is the victory, and 3 days after the summit, the official paperwork arrived. An envelope from the state with my full legal name at the top, Avery Cross, not a trace of Ward left. Inside, a designation form, confirming I was still listed as my father's next of kin. Primary medical decision maker. The checkbox at the bottom asked one thing. Do you accept responsibility for continued care? I held the pen, sat in my office, sun creeping through the windows, the sound of women in the kitchen cooking lunch, laughing, living, and I didn't check yes. I didn't check no. I just folded the form and slid it into the bottom drawer. Then I went out to water the flowers. That afternoon, I found Madison in the lounge, sitting next to our father. She looked tired, not from care, but from pretending. Her makeup flawless, but her voice trembling. He needs help, she said, eyes not quite meeting mine. The rehab center denied him. Insurance won't cover it. You're the only one with the authority. You're not trying to guilt me, I cut in. She blinked. No, she whispered. I already did that. My father stared at me, or tried to, half his face frozen, the other trying to remember how power used to feel. Whatever you think happened back then, he rasped. I stopped him cold. You don't get to start sentences like that. Not here. He didn't argue. Maybe he couldn't, or maybe he knew deep down I'd already made my choice. I motioned toward the room. This place, I said, was never built for people like you. It's for the ones you taught to shrink, the ones who were told they were too much, too loud, too sensitive. No one moved, no one interrupted. 15 women sat nearby, some in slippers, one folding laundry. They didn't need to speak. Their presence was enough. I walked over to a side table and picked up a manila envelope, handed it to Madison. It's the formal denial of responsibility. He's being referred to state care. The placement call will come next week. You'll need to answer it. She looked like she wanted to cry. I didn't stop her, but I didn't comfort her either. I turned to him, this man who once laughed while I stood blindfolded in a field of weeds and rot. You don't get to die in the home of the girl you left for dead. He flinched. Or maybe that was just the stroke. Either way, I nodded to the door. Our coordinator wheeled him out. Madison followed, clutching her purse like it might shield her from shame. No one clapped. This wasn't a movie. Someone stirred soup. Another refilled the tea kettle. And just like that, the air felt lighter. No screaming, no breakdown, just peace, reclaimed. Later that week, we planted a garden where the old shed used to be. A bench made from salvaged wood sat in the middle. Someone nailed a plaque to the backrest without asking me. We don't go back to the people who buried us alive. We plant gardens over the place they left us for dead. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just sat for a moment, solid, free. Have you ever walked away from people who said you were too much or not enough? Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story hit a nerve, hit like, hit subscribe. Not for me, for you. So you don't forget that you're not the only one still standing.